Hello, football family. Welcome into Huddle It Up Films, continuing the Camp Chatter series with a man who's actually been out at practice and has seen some of the Ravens practices with his own eyes. One of my favorite people to talk football with on his show all the time. It's Ken McKusick, Mr. Film Study. Ken, at the very beginning, of course, just like on your show, can you please tell everyone where they can find your work?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Jason. Filmstudybaltimore.com is the website. The podcast is called Film Study Baltimore Ravens Talk, and it's out there on all the major podcast apps. You can follow me on Twitter at Film Study Ravens.
There you go. Also on the radio from time to time, I see.
Sure.
I've heard you on there. Morning show, right?
Yeah, 105.7. I'm on with Cordell Woodland a fair amount in the evening as well. So very happy to be have a couple opportunities there as well.
Ken, so glad you're here because we get reports coming out of camp, and a lot of times it's the same thing. So you can kind of rely on them. If more than one reporter is saying this guy looks good, this needs work, that and the other, you can kind of put stock into that. But to have someone that I talk ball with all the time on the show to tell me what you're seeing with your own two eyes out there is just, it's great of you to make time with your early schedule and everything to come on the show. So thank you very much for that.
No problem at all, Jason. Thanks for all the support you've given to my show over the years too, and I really appreciate it.
So Ken, the one unit that seems to be looking very good consistently every day from the reports is this defensive line. I just want to open it up in general to you and ask you some follow-ups. What are you seeing out there with this group, and is it as good as does it look as good as the reports are saying?
I think it looks excellent, and the biggest players on the line certainly look terrific. Michael Pierce has been terrific. I was going to call him Brandon Williams, Broderick Washington, Brandon Williams also, but that's okay. Broderick Washington has looked terrific. I think that Matabike has looked very good, penetrated a lot, shown a lot of physicality that's at a higher level sometimes in the offensive line in this early going. We'll see how that translates on the field as time goes on when it's real live fire. We've seen good things from Travis Jones, and that's of course really important because he's the only one signed for 2024. Brent Urban had a couple plays in one day recently that was good to see. So those five all have looked terrific. Angelo Blackson and Rashad Nichols and others are there, and they've made a play or two, but haven't really jumped on the radar yet. And I think those guys are just probably on a little bit on the outside of the roster right now, if I had to guess. But it looks, if the depth holds up as it has so far, it's going to be a very good defensive line.
So before we get to the starters, you mentioned Blackson and Botts and some of the other guys. They're going to get an opportunity coming up here soon, presumably to play a ton of snaps. Obviously Pierce is not going to play. Brett Urban's not going to play. Really, Matabike, there's no reason for him to risk injury. Do any of those guys, do you think, stylistically fit? If we were to have an injury, like who would be the next man up? Who are we going to want on our practice squad from what you've been able to see?
Right. If I had to guess, I'd say Rashad Nichols will make the practice squad for sure. In terms of other players, not sure, but Blackson might be the next guy. I see him more as a depth guy were something to go wrong. I think if you're looking to keep a player for several years, you stand a better chance to keep one of the younger guys, either Botts or Kaim Caesar, who are there and you'd have control of for 4 years, whereas Blackson, you're just signing him for this year.
Right. Nichols has got some time last year, held his own a little bit, at least got his feet wet. So, that would definitely be a dependable piece. It's always nice to have some depth there in the D-line, but I wanted to focus in on Travis Jones. We were listening to Anthony Weaver's press conference, and it was kind of hard to hear the question, but you could tell by the context that whoever asked the question was asking him about putting Travis Jones on the field with Michael Pierce, like having those two big guys on the. Go ahead, Ken.
That was me.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I asked the question. So first of all, Weaver, incredibly impressive coach. The Ravens are very lucky to have him. He speaks very well. He obviously is a leader just from his demeanor and manner, is one that would naturally lend itself to that.
He
Going to
seems
be a
like a head
coach that we
coach to
could.
me, Ken.
Oh yeah,
Sounds like a head coach to me.
yeah, it really, really does, and I hope it's something he can jump to pretty quickly. Of course, the Ravens are incented to help him pursue those opportunities as they come along, because they get draft picks if he makes it, and I think there's a pretty good chance in this case that he will. And it's just exciting to see him be so good. But yes, I asked him the question about did he think there was a possibility of those two playing at 1 and 3. Because Michael Pierce had broke into the league as a nose tackle with Brandon Williams bumping over to 3 tech. And he said, yeah, that was something where we could get much more physical with teams that if we think they're a little soft and we just want to mash them, or if the other team is a run team, but it would be dependent upon an opponent. And I'm paraphrasing his answer, but that's the gist of it in terms of what was going on there. There's a lot of talented 3 techs. I also asked the question in a slightly different manner to Michael Pierce, who was on that day, and asked him about what could a 1-3 combination like that provide. And he said that he thought yes and no, this could happen. And one of the issues was that Justin Madubuike was the 3 tech, and taking him off the field, just the way he's playing right now, was very deferential to him. It was a good way to put it. Of course, Broderick Washington also is there to compete at that 3 tech and has looked good. And that is something the Ravens really need. They need competition for those defensive line snaps. They need obviously healthy defensive linemen. And, so far, so good.
Boy, did I look into that one, Ken. I
appreciate it. I thought
I couldn't hear your question. I mean, the kids are in the back screaming a lot, so it's kind of hard to hear sometimes. You got to go by context, because I really want to know what the question was to tell how they're answering it, because very often they're gonna put it in terms that can't be cut out for a hot take or a quote. So it's very important to hear the actual question when I'm trying to determine what the coach is getting at. But I think Travis Jones could force himself into that role. Obviously, it's Madubuike's job, so not saying he's going to overstep Madubuike, but we're going to rotate our guys in there. There's no secret about that. And if Madubuike takes a break, if Travis Jones can provide pressure from that spot, it might be he might earn a bigger role aside from just against soft offensive linemen, interior offensive linemen.
Yeah, I think that's exactly true. Madubuike is probably the best pure pass rusher among the defensive linemen, but he's not the best pure run defender. And I think Jones and Pierce provide a better run front. And also, Madubuike played 59% of the snaps last year, and his play wore down in 2 ways. It wore down in games where he played more snaps, and it wore down towards the end of the season. That tells me a guy who would be more effective playing maybe 47, 48% of the snaps. And that's no slight to Justin Madubuike. I'm sure he wants to be out there as often as possible. But more important is that each of those snaps is at the highest possible quality. So you get the best combination of amount of time on the field and quality on terms of snap by snap performance. And I think he'll do better if he plays more pass rush snaps, fewer early down snaps. And that really leads into what Travis Jones can provide this team, which is a tremendous penetrating one-on-one guard beating presence from that 3 tech spot on early downs. I think it's just tremendously exciting what he could be for this Ravens team. Exactly.
And with Michael Pierce and Travis Jones, you don't have enough offensive linemen to double both of them. And Michael Pierce for sure has proven to be a handful one-on-one. If Travis Jones elevates his game, takes the next natural step up, he could definitely play that role in early downs. I love the thought there, Ken, of Madubuike managing his snaps and what you've gotten from his play last year. Maybe he was playing a little too much. He wore down a little bit to the end of the year. That's going to be something now that I personally am going to monitor, Ken, because going into his 4th year, his contract year, I know not only him, but the Ravens are going to want him to showcase his abilities. If they can't pay him to where they could get, these defensive linemen, you look, Madubuike could be looking at a $20 million a year, $23 million a year type deal if he shows out and can become a 6, 7, 8 sack guy, just making up numbers here in the middle of that defense. So I think they want that production from Madubuike, but I share your concern that they may be going about it the wrong way.
Well, I mean, and the way to manage him to some extraordinary personal levels is to give him the highest leverage snaps and the ones that will provide the best pass rushing opportunities. And the Ravens are going to have to replace Calais Campbell's snaps in some way. So Calais Campbell was on the field an awful lot last year, although he was hurt for part of the year. He was still on the field. Let me get to this right now.
Sure, take your
For
time.
51.1% of the team snaps. That includes the postseason. So they have to find a way to replace that. And Michael Pierce is going to be a big part of that, being healthy the whole year. But Michael Pierce is also a nose tackle, and Campbell is a I can play anywhere the hell I want player. So if each of those players is going to basically have to play a little lighter towards the outside, towards five tech, towards even playing a little bit defensive end, if you're talking about Brent Urban or even Matabike maybe, playing maybe an uncovered end on the end with a tackle. You got various looks the Ravens are capable of showing, and I think a lot of that is figuring out exactly how do they replace a player like Campbell. And I think it has to start with Campbell's presence on third down, where he was in there all the time with the other pass rushers they'd bring in. You got to start there, and Matabike is the obvious guy to be on the field on those downs. And so I think that naturally means he's got to take a lighter load on earlier downs. And, then we naturally can see the evolution of Travis Jones into a three-tech.
Agreed, because when I look at the run defense overall from this team for this team, I'm not concerned. We have big guys. Matabike, like you said, is the best pass rusher out of the interior defensive linemen. Travis Jones, Michael Pierce, Broderick Washington, not to mention the guys playing behind them in Roquan and PQ. I'm not really, my concern level for run defense is very, very low. What I'm interested with Matabike as well is, when we're playing this nickel defense, and obviously the plan seems to be to keep both linebackers on the field, at least to start the season the whole time, those four up front, Matabike can play that 4-eye role that we saw a lot last year from Campbell. If the weakness is on the left side of their line, their left guard is a little bit weak in pass pro, we can put Matabike over there. If the right guard's a little weaker, most teams have a strong player at right guard. Maybe we can put Matabike there. Odafe Oweh had a lot of success towards the end of last season, sliding on the inside. So it's going to be interesting for me to see how they match up that four-man rush before they bring in the blitzes, obviously, on these passing downs, Ken. How do while we're on DLine, I have to ask you about Odafe Oweh and David Ojabo, two hot topics. Everybody's saying how great they look. Can you just give a basic assessment of each one?
So they've been playing them both on the field with the ones, which is one of the interesting things. So I did have a question for McDonald earlier in camp is, with Bowser out, how does the onus shift to those two to pick up some of the coverage responsibilities he would have? And it's been kind of a bugaboo for me that I didn't want to see Oweh forced into a Sam role, although the Ravens, have not found that obvious replacement for Tyus. They haven't found. They didn't sign Kyle Van Noy, who would have been a guy who certifiably has a tremendous Sam history in his career. And they don't have anybody else who's an obvious fit for it. Tavius Robinson is a pure rush guy and a rookie, and I don't think you could lump that responsibility on his plate early. So Odafe Oweh could play on the Sam side. If he's forced to, it probably could potentially hurt him developmentally. Anyway, so I want to see him really focused on pass rushing, improving that get off, using his combination moves, getting his timing right on that while Chuck Smith is around to help him with that. David Ojabo has been playing mostly on that side that would be the Sam side. Now, if you're in 7-on-7 drills, you don't really see much in terms of him being responsible for things. You'll see a lot of different things during the regular season and during the preseason, I think, in terms of how they may use Ojabo on that side to jam a receiver, maybe do some different things maybe than Bowser did. It's kind of like the difference between having like a Tavon Young and a Kyle Hamilton at slot corner. They both can be very effective, but they're very different in terms of how they can help you. And so Hamilton does it more with his physicality and his tenacity, but they both have those good second man of the ball skills. They both have some things in common in terms of coverage ability and downhill play. But I think that's the case with Ojabo and with Bowser, is that you're getting a highly qualified pass rusher on that side if that's where he sticks. And the Ravens will have to make other adjustments to their pass rush and lose some of the flexibility that went with him, went with Bowser, in terms of him being able to drop to cover and all of the alternate blitz options that they had, blitzing the slot, safety, inside linebacker, when he dropped and provided a very effective zone coverage defender.
Absolutely, and I mean that's a great part of the game. And Bowser's, I mean that's what makes Tyus Bowser is his ability to do both. And I mean Ken, I want to say 8 was the number. He had 8 sacks, just raw numbers. People can relate to them. 8 sacks in a Wink Martindale defense a couple of years ago before he hurt his Achilles in the final game of the season. That's a big number for a Sam in Wink's defense. So Tyus can get pressure. He's, his ability in coverage is well documented. And just for anybody out there who hasn't listened to Ken and I on his show, we were actually sparred about this a little bit last time because I'm not freaking out about it, Ken. I would like Kyle Van Noy on this team to have another Sam, but I see our high leverage downs are going to come against 3 receivers. We're going to have 5 DBs on the field. We're going to have Roquan and PQ on the field at 7. So that leaves 4 up front, and I think those 4 are going to rush most of the time. So if we want to talk about, okay, we're playing the Steelers this week, and they play a lot of 2 tight ends, and they're going to run the ball at us, then yeah, we're going to need Sam. But I think for the biggest parts of the season, while Tyus is getting his feet back under him, that we'll be okay in that. And if we have to play Tavius as a strong side defensive end or Ojabo a strong side defensive end, that'll be okay. It just won't be, like to your point, our whole bag of tricks won't be opened.
Yeah, it won't have the flexibility is the issue clearly. And Queen and Roquan handle the coverage end, sure, but you want him to rush the passer. I mean, those guys are 2 very significant threats to get in after the quarterback. And if you rush Tyus and Roquan, you can do both. Cross blitz with them, you can do all sorts of things, but then you need to have someone drop from the line of scrimmage. You really can't do it without that. And Tyus just provided them a tremendous amount of flexibility. He's the best coverage outside linebacker in the entire NFL. And it was the defense. People think that the defense really turned around just because Roquan Smith arrived. That also coincided with the return of Tyus Bowser last year.
That's right. That's right. It was right around the same game, wasn't it?
Same game.
Okay. Yeah, I'd forgotten that. I was rewatching games out of like a month or 2 ago, and I watched that Saints game. And they said it on this is Tyus is for that. So it's in the back of my mind. So Ken, something that I've talked about with almost every single person so far in this series is Zay Flowers. So I want to give you my concern right away. People have heard it. I apologize. I had taught when I talked to Voss and Yuri, I was concerned that they'd pigeonhole him into the slot. Word comes out of camp. They're moving everybody everywhere. Your guy over here is very happy to hear that because I think he is a Z receiver when it's all said and done. I just wanted to ask you, though, what my worry is with him is that he's ready to go now. Odell is ramping up. Bateman hasn't stepped on the practice field. We saw in the open practice, Ken, that, when Zay was out and Odell was still half speed, Bateman's not there. We had Prochet, Duvernay running with the ones. And Lamar had nowhere to go with the ball except to revert back to hitting Andrews and hitting Likely. My worry with Zay is that they're going to pigeonhole him into like a glorified Devin Duvernay role as like the gadget guy, the jet motion guy, the bubble screen guy, the picks and rubs guy, and they won't turn him loose as a receiver. Say those dig routes, the hitch routes, all the things that Zay can do, showed he could do in college. What is your feel on how? Am I overthinking this by being too concerned that they're going to pigeonhole him into a smaller role early on?
Okay, well, right now, I think the feeling is, and you hear this said in various ways, that, oh my God, look what we have here. Let's try and see what we can do with this great toy we have in our bag of tricks. And he has run all sorts of things, just like what you're saying. And to see the Ravens actually practicing rub routes and thinking, oh, that could be really effective when you have multiple players who can run them. And you mentioned 2 right away. Or, Justice Hill you can add in that group if you want to flex him out. But anybody who you can get rubbed off in speed in a yak opportunity in the middle of the field, I love it. And that can include any of the big three speed guys the Ravens have. It could include Keaton Mitchell if you want to come up with a name that you could find a new way for. But I don't think it's going to be exclusively Zay, but we have seen some of that. There's been some gadgetry for sure going on. I think we'll see some, and I think it's okay that we see some. I think it's okay that on any particular down that the other team doesn't really know who might be a gadget player and who might be running a vertical. I think that's probably a positive thing. What we've seen from Zay Flowers down the field has been truly remarkable. And one of the things that he really came out with as a hit on him is that he's not the greatest route runner. They face a lot of zone coverage, and he's good at finding space in zone and whatnot. And he's a very sudden athlete who loses a player very quickly. But when you talk about route running, usually what I'm talking about when I define that, other people may mean different things, is that they can lose a defensive back with a move they make at the top of the stem. They force the other guy to make the wrong move, then they capitalize on it. We saw, I think, it's hard for me to say whether Flowers actually induced the move, but he was in one-on-one for 3 separate reps against Kayvon Seymour. And Kayvon Seymour, the first time, he just way overbit, it looked like, on the outside route. It's just a single step, and all of a sudden, Flowers literally separated by about 8 to 10 yards from him because he'd taken the wrong step, and Flowers was immediately gone. Big turn, ooze from the crowd in terms of that particular play. I think we've seen some of that in various ways. What I really want to see, and Keith Williams seems to be very focused on this, is getting players to be excellent decelerators. So you got a guy with great straight line speed. Get him to be a decelerator who can sell a stop and go, who can use it to cut or hitch, whatever it might be. But those comeback routes, those back shoulders that we always used to see in the Derek Mason and Joe Flacco era, I think those could really be back. I think those could be something to see. These look great on the back shoulder.
That would be excellent. And I love your description. I want to put it a different way for anybody else that's out there. I think that as far as Ravens receivers go, Hollywood Brown was much the same way. There wasn't a lot of deception. There wasn't a lot of mixing speeds. And that's the way Zay played at Boston College. It was full go. And how did he create separation? Just with his sheer athletic ability, being quicker than you, stop, start, and all that other stuff. Then you look at a guy that we both scouted heavily in Jerry Jeudy, who does it with some deception. He's a taller guy. He needs to be deceptive. Justin Jefferson, very deceptive. Cooper Kupp, Hunter Renfrow. There's a bunch of receivers that don't have the quickness of Zay Flowers or Hollywood Brown that can get open. So if Zay can add a little bit of manipulation to his game, like Odell has in spades, that could make him very, very dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. And Odell Beckham, one of the great route runners in the last decade in the NFL. So if that, there is so much for Zay to learn from him, or from, frankly, anybody else who really understands route running, but certainly from Beckham, who's a master at it. That could be a huge addition to his game. I think I've heard Flowers speak out on that during camp and basically say that at Boston College, we faced a lot of zone defense. There wasn't as much opportunity for really tricky route running, and I'm paraphrasing now. So he was doing more of cutting into space and doing the things. And honestly, the Ravens will face plenty of zone defense because it's Lamar Jackson. So, he's going to have to be good at those kind of things, at finding space in zone. But the other thing he really needs to be good at is taking the top off the defense and demanding safety help. And his suddenness as an athlete is going to force that, I believe. So whether it's, how he stops and goes, or whether it's how he effectively makes his cut at the top to go corner, post, or just a pure vertical. I think those 3 opportunities those couple opportunities are ways in which the safety are going to have to be much more interested in what he's doing than what Andrews underneath has been doing. And that should create much better target opportunities for Andrews, I believe, this year.
So we've learned over the years, like you just stated, that a lot of zone coverage is played when Lamar Jackson's your quarterback. You don't want to press a DB and run with them and have your back to Lamar Jackson. And he can hurt you. And we've kind of learned that in the evaluation process of, ordering, well, can you get off press? It's just not quite as important to the Ravens as it is other quarterbacks or other teams with quarterbacks that you feel comfortable pressing their receivers. But that said, if you want to move around enough, eventually you're going to have to get off press. So you mentioned the Kayvon Seymour, but how does Zay look in general? How is he working his hand fighting? Obviously, he's lightning quick side to side, but getting off of press, Zay Flowers.
Well, I was actually going to finish that story, and I kind of forgot, and I left it as a hanging thread here. But rep number 2 against Kayvon Seymour, he looked terrifically good again, and got free. I think it was behind Seymour, and there's really nothing Kayvon could do. Rep number 3, Seymour came up and latched onto him at the line of scrimmage and didn't let him get off. Literally, just almost held him. The whole rest of the defensive backs, which were there, watching this drill, all crowded onto the field and cheered for Seymour. It was really an underdog story in the making. But he's got, he's a smaller guy. He's going to have some issues with that. As a Z receiver, one of the advantages he has is he's off of the line of scrimmage. So if you're next receiver, you better be able to get off press coverage because you're right on the line of scrimmage, same as an offensive lineman. If you're a Z receiver, you actually are at least a yard off the line of scrimmage by definition. That allows you to go in motion and move through the backfield, for example, but allows you to have an easier time releasing directly from that spot. Usually, if there is another receiver between you and the tackle, there's always another receiver between you and the tackle on that side, or almost always. It'd be a tight end, and they'd be right up at the line of scrimmage, either in line to the right of the tackle, or they'd be on the line of scrimmage in say a 12 personnel look or a flex tight end look, where they'd be on that line of scrimmage and allowing Zay as the Z, didn't that work out conveniently, to be off the line of scrimmage to the right of him.
Z Flowers, I like it. Z Flowers. So, have you seen him go up against Marlon at all in like one-on-one type situations?
Yeah, he had a good rep against Marlon. Marlon actually won that one, and I think Marlon is crafty, effectively used space, and kind of angled him towards the sidelines. You can think of Jimmy Smith or Ike Taylor doing that in the division in terms of being guys who really had a hulking physical presence they could provide. That was good, and you got credit to Marlon on that particular rep. Zay needs to have something to work with to get going. Obviously, he wants to have a little bit of a release. If anybody's playing off coverage against him, he wants to be able to use that and use the top of the stem, hopefully, to lose that player. But like anybody else, I mean, you can't start a fire on snow. You have to have something to work on, right?
Oh, that's right. And he does have some upside despite being a senior. As far as room to grow in his game, he's a rookie. I think all rookies have something to learn. So just really excited about Zay Flowers. I had to hear it from you. So there's another player that I want to talk about with you that hasn't gotten a lot of attention. You never hear his name, but he's someone that I think has a legitimate shot to make this roster, the opening roster, and that's Daryl Worley. Now, Daryl Worley, for those who forgot, played against Cincinnati late in the year and had a really nice game. All heart. I think he got beat once or twice, of course, by Jamar Chase. Mm-hmm. He also broke up a pass in the end zone, an extremely acrobatic play, more than held his own. And I think that he somewhat has been under the radar. He played some good football, I believe, for the Bears. Not a bad player. And I'm wondering, with the uncertainty now, Rocky Sin, Trayvon Mullen hasn't gotten on the field here, if Worley could really cover or carve out a role here with the Ravens. So just general thoughts before I ask you some follow-ups there, Ken.
Yeah, Worley had a terrific game, as you mentioned, in that last game of the regular season against Cincinnati, 52 yards on 10 targets. So they picked on him a little bit, but 5.2 yards per target if you're having to face, Boyd and Chase and those guys is a hell of a game. He's a big length and size guy, so very long, over 33 inches, I believe, in terms of his length, which is exceptional for a cornerback, and he's about 6'2". Came into the league as a guy who already was thought to be too slow to play corner. I think he ran a 4.60, 4.40, if I recall. You could look it up maybe while I'm talking here. But he was a guy who they really already had tagged as a safety at Carolina. And he ended up playing a whole lot of games in the NFL as a starting cornerback in his years. So I want to say he's played something like 53 or thereabouts starts in the NFL already. So he's not a spring chicken by any means. And if you look back to last year, you may not have heard Daryl Worley's name a lot, but if you look at the transaction wire, you saw it a lot because the Ravens had some absurd number of transactions for it. It's more than I've ever seen for one player in one season. Something like 18 times where they moved him up or elevated him for the practice squad, and then they signed him to the roster, and then they cut him, and then they re-signed him to the practice squad, then they elevated him again. It went on and on the whole season, indicative of a player they really like. This year, we've seen him playing a fair amount of safety, obviously still in there in drills and one-on-one drills to cover people. I think with Brandon Stephens getting a shot at the slot corner role, which I wouldn't have really guessed was the way they'd go, but Pepe had been out for a while before this was before he returned. And even after he's been returned, we've still seen Stephens some there. We've seen Worley a lot covering for him at safety. And that's, I think, a position where, he could potentially provide another very versatile defensive back for the Ravens.
There you go, 4.64 out of West Virginia. Mm-hmm. So there you go with the 40 time. Good call on that. And a couple of articles right below it, I could see the title was he's faster than that is what they were saying in the little blurb.
He got drafted pretty early, right? He was like 77th overall, or he was in the third round maybe?
He was. I mean, he's just a very good football player, as you've heard me say on your show. Forget about the athletic ability as far as a good football player. He's a good football player like Ardarius is, but Daryl Worley has the size to play in this league. And he also has the instincts, in my opinion. You put him back in zone where he can get his hands on some passes. And let's face it, Ken, the difference between a strong safety and a slot corner is basically sometimes just simple as the size of the target. Mm-hmm. If you're facing a smaller, quick slot receiver and a big old tight end, you want your strong safety on the tight end, obviously. But if they're both big targets, there's roles of, slot cornerback, strong safety. The lines are kind of blurred. So I early on when Harbaugh said we're moving Brandon Stephens to safety, I was pretty upset with that. So I'm very, very happy to hear that he's working in at cornerback, whether it be slot or maybe, we're facing a team whose number one wide receiver gets moved around. So maybe, like Tampa Bay last year with Chris Godwin, when Godwin moved to the slot, Marlon moved with him and Stephens could stick on the outside. Like, I like all those combinations.
Yeah, it certainly got a lot of that available. I will say one name we can't forget at this point is Arthur Mollett. He came over from the Steelers and he looked fantastic the other day. So I'm at a point where he might be the front runner right now. Now he arrived fairly late in camp, and he's just starting to get his opportunities right now. He'll be I'm sure, in the preseason game and probably play most of the second half. I would think he might play the first half for that matter, but we'll see him a fair amount in this first preseason game, and I think we'll see him even more as the time goes along. Had a big interception on I think it was Tuesday. So it was Wednesday, I believe. So anyway, he's looked pretty good.
Comfortable in zone, comfortable in man. What stuck out to you, Ken?
Well, two things. One is he got one pass defense in a 7-on-7 play, and it was a matter of he was still playing when everybody else had given up. And I think it was that one was more of a bad look for the offense, that they just had some players who I run my route. What do you want me to do now? Well, if you play for the Baltimore Ravens, you better know what comes next, because that's what Lamar does as he extends plays. So that wasn't a great look, but Mollett was able to swat down a pass. It was in the middle of the field that he had his interception. It was about 5 yards, 3 circles. So when I say that, 3 circle is my notation for between the hashes. And if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the slots across the field, and it was the kind of interception you might see from a inside linebacker, but in his case, it's definitely a slot corner because he had makeup speed. The ball was thrown a little bit behind, and that meant that the the receiver had to slow for the ball a little bit, and he was already having to use his makeup speed to come back on the crosser. Then he caught the ball, and he was gone immediately from the receiver. He's completely out of the picture, so to speak, in terms of it being on camera at that point, because the differential in speed was at a point where it made him look even better than the interception was.
So overall concern level with the secondary, Ken, while I have you here, if you want to give me a scale of 1 to 10, I'm talking about depth, effectiveness of this. We'll just say the corners. We'll just say the cornerback.
If you eliminated just corner, I'm at about 9.5.
Really?
Very high level of concern about it. It's the biggest weakness on the team. It is. They've so far had pretty darn disastrous results trying to figure out who their next guys up are. So Marlon, can you really ever be a 9.5 when you have Marlon Humphrey as a number one? That would be a legitimate way to question my rating here, but they have not, in my opinion, done a very good job sifting through the background talent that they have. So Trayvon Mullen was the guy who was supposed to be there. They cut him and re-signed him, basically got rid of, I believe anyway, his guaranteed contract structure. I have not seen that officially, but I imagine that was part of the agreement to re-sign him, was that they would get rid of that. And then, he may or may not be back. We'll see if he makes the team at this point, given the concerns over injury. They've got Daryl Worley, who they've been playing at safety some, and I think he probably could shift back. They've got Stevens, who I think might be the best option for a number 3 corner right now, but they're trying to use him at the slot. So Caillou Blue-Kelly has not shown much so far in camp. He's one guy that, I'm really going to love seeing him in the second half of the preseason games to see exactly what he's got. I'll be very interested. He'll be one of the players I definitely am focused on. But they're just have not done a lot of sorting through a very deep group of players. Corey Mayfield's made a couple plays, by the way, their other cornerback draft pick. So that's kind of been nice to see. We'll see if he sticks on the team or not.
Excellent info, Ken. Thanks so much for your time here. And just for everybody watching, we're going to try to get Ken back on at least one more, if not 2 more times before this season starts. And if things start getting chaotic, because this kind of information coming from the person that's coming from in Ken is extremely valuable to me. And I wanted my football family to hear it. Arthur Millette, do you think he's in good enough shape, Ken, to be able to log a couple of quarters?
Hard for me to really say.
Right.
He's had his flashes where he's looked a lot faster than other players, but like I told you, there were some circumstances that were conspiring to make him look good on the play. I still think we'll see him for a fair number of snaps. I think, the opportunity is there. I think he knows it. I think he would see this as probably a crossroads moment this preseason for him. It could be the end of his NFL career if he can't stick with the Ravens. So we'll see.
Ken, thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate that.
Okay, no problem at all, buddy.
So with that, I want to say thank you to my football family. Love my football family. And we'll catch you guys next time. Ken, say goodbye to the people for me, please.
Goodbye, people.